Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc Beef Podcast, for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's show, I'm joined by Sinead Devaney, Teagasc advisor, and Dr. David Kinney, researcher at Teagasc Grange, to discuss the key aspects of pregnancy scanning cows. I first asked David, what are the key benefits of scanning?
Well, I suppose the first one and the primary one, Catherine, is to establish pregnancy. So unfortunately, every year we'll say there's a large number of, a significant number of cows both cows and heifers being carried over, we'll say, that are not pregnant. And in many cases where the farmer has not scanned the cows and is carrying these empty cows over the winter and feeding them, in some cases we'll say under the illusion, we'll say that they're pregnant. So obviously that's a huge waste in the system. Outside of that, obviously we'll say picking up, we'll say twin pregnancies, and being able to either pin those cows or accordingly, or to be able to, feed them, we'll say, appropriately, so that they don't overly lose condition. And for certain, maybe pedigree breeders, we'll say sex and fetuses, we'll say, obviously is something else that can be done within a fairly narrow window in early pregnancy as well. So there are many, many benefits, but the primary one obviously is, to be able to have the knowledge, to be able to establish which cows are pregnant and which those that aren't, and obviously we'll say make a plan for those, and in most cases it would be to cull the cows.
And in most cases, breeding season is over on many farms. How soon after the bull is removed can scanning take place?
Yeah, the recommended, I suppose, the highly skilled operator could potentially pick up a pregnancy, we'll say, at 25 days. But, in most cases, 28 days, 30 days, would be the earliest. Again, what you're looking for is the fetal heartbeat there to establish, that you have a live fetus, we'll say, within the cow at that time. So, the recommendation would be to wait about a month, we'll say, maybe 32 days. And then from then on, we'll say, then, cows can be picked up. The other end of the scale, I suppose, ideally, the window would be for a more accurate diagnosis, particularly relating to potentially the age of the fetus and when you might expect that cow to calve. The window would be somewhere between a month, I suppose, we'll say, and about 4 months of pregnancy. So if you're planning, we'll say, to get your cows done, to get your cows scanned, you should try to, work within that window.
And this is particularly important considering that 80% of calves born in the beef herd are using a stock bull.
Precisely, and that's exactly it. So maybe the service dates mightn't be as accurate as one might hope, and the picking up, we'll say, of repeat breedings, for example, as well, we'll say, can often be missed. So that's another great advantage, we'll say, of, I suppose, scanning early in a timely fashion, in that not alone can you establish pregnancy, but you can also get, certainly if it's done within the first 100 days or so, quite an accurate, or very accurate, essentially, we'll say, estimation of when that cow should be due to calve.
And there is a shorter window if you're scanning cows that may be detected that they have twins.
Yes, so essentially the recommended, I suppose, time to pick up twins would be probably from about 6 weeks, we'll say, to about maybe 100 days. So essentially you want to be able to scan the womb, we'll say, on both, I suppose, horns of the uterus or the womb, we'll say there, to establish whether there's, one or two fetuses present. And to be able to, if you want to kind of make a call in terms of the size or however the scanner may be estimating age, we'll say there, I suppose if you can do it within that window, we'll say there of about, as I say, about 6 weeks, we'll say to about, max 120 days, you have a much better chance. Beyond that, then the womb tends to enlarge, we'll say the fetus is obviously getting larger at about 100, I suppose, 30, 40 days. It's like the size almost of a small cat. And then the womb begins to, go beyond, we'll say, the pelvic ring. So again, to be able to, it's much more difficult to get, I suppose, an accurate image of the developing fetus at that time.
If scanning reveals that there's a number of cows empty in the herd at the moment, what steps can farmers take?
Yes, I suppose, like ultimately, if you're in a spring calving system, and mid-August onwards there, the cows that are not, would say, and by the time that, I suppose, the bull has been pulled at that stage, maybe, and it's into September, we'll say, before the cows are being scanned, and in many farms it's September, October, kind of, or prior to housing, that decision is made to scan cows. At that stage it's too late really to go rebreeding, we'll say, unless that you have an autumn herd, for example. And I suppose the advice would be, to cull those cows, we'll say, and maybe replace them, we'll say, with a cow or a heifer, we'll say, later in the season. Either purchase one, or if you happen to have extra, we'll say, heifer's bred.
Not alone does scanning identify cows that are not in calf, as you mentioned, David, but up to calving, cows can be housed in separate pens. What benefit does this have?
Yes, obviously it allows farmers to feed cows according to pregnancy and also maybe according to condition score more importantly. Like we know, for example, Catherine, that the condition of the cow at calving is the primary driver of when that cow will resume, I suppose, normal heat cycles again after calving. So typically cows that calve down in moderate to good condition, those cows come back cycling again, we'll say, much quicker than cows that calve down, we'll say, in poor condition. So in order, we'll say, to put, I suppose, condition on cows, they need to be fed preferentially for a significant period of time. If you take, we'll say, a typical body condition score, in a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is extremely obese or extremely fat, and 1 is extremely emaciated or thin, and our target, we'll say, for calving will be somewhere between 2.5 to 3. To put a condition score on a cow, it's equivalent to about 70 kilograms, we'll say, plus of actual live weight. So that's essentially, 2 months of good feeding, we'll say, to, including concentrate, we'll say, to be able to put that kind of a weight, we'll say, on a cow. So I suppose ultimately, if you can pin cows, according to, I suppose, when they're due, if cows are all in decent condition, and if not, well, then obviously on top of that, cows that are in particularly poor condition, or indeed cows maybe they've been identified as carrying twins, well, they're going to need preferential treatment to avoid issues, later in the spring.
That's great, David. Sinead, David has outlined the benefits of scanning, but year on year, you're seeing on farms when scanning doesn't take place. What happens?
Well, I suppose David touched on some of that there too. The farmer hasn't the calving dates. He doesn't know when they're going to start calving. He doesn't know when their calving is going to be finished. He may not know what cows are in calf, or even if they're carrying twins. So it's impossible to guess that type of information, and he can't make informed decisions as regard to what feeding regime he'd have on the farm over the winter, or even a vaccination program, where needed, or where to target these at the correct dates and times, and all of that. I suppose scanning gives him the allowance, I suppose, to make informed decisions, so that he can make good, clear decisions and the right decisions for his farm and for housing animals for the winter and in the run up to calving. Calves can be born on the flats where the farmer isn't expecting them to calf yet, and that can cause other complications as well.
There's a difference this year, Sinead, when it comes to choosing cows that are being kept over the winter on beef farms. Why is this?
Well, there is a difference this year because farmers that are in schemes need to bear that in mind. And I suppose the one that sticks out to my mind is the beam scheme, and farmers have signed up for the beam scheme, which involves a cutback or a reduction in the organic nitrogen on their farm. So it means that they will need to cut back their animals, their cattle, I suppose, by 5% in organic nitrogen terms from now until the end of June of next year. So if the farmer decides to scan cows in good time, well, he can then make the informed decision of culling cows or removing them from the farm, which will help to start his 5% cutback sooner rather than later and help him reach his target figures in the line of that scheme. So this year more than ever, from that point of view, the scanning would be important, because if the farmer doesn't meet his target, he has already been paid for his beam scheme, and there will be a penalty, if he doesn't reach that, he may have to pay back all of the money. So it is important to be able to make decisions on what animals should be cut back for, especially coming into the winter, and it would be ideal to be able to remove cows that are not in calf, if that was the case, and scanning will help to identify those.
So there is a big push to scan cows that bit earlier, particularly for the beam scheme that you mentioned, the beef exceptional aid measure for any farmer that's participating in that scheme.
Yes.
What else do farmers need to consider before selling cows that would not be in calf?
Yeah, well, I suppose farmers are also in other schemes, Catherine. They would be suckler farmers tend to be in quite a number of schemes. So there's also the BDGP scheme and the BEEP scheme there. So the BDGP is coming to an end this year, and in October of this year, I suppose that's the Beef Data Genomics Programme. That if the farmers are partaking in that, in the BDGP 1, then on the 31st of October this year, they need to have 50% of their reference number of animals genotype 4 or 5 star. So that's on the replacement index. So they need to make sure that they have enough 4 or 5 star animals to make up this 50%, and they need to bear in mind that, you know, if they're making a decision to cull animals, to cull cows, or to sell heifers, then they must ensure that the particular cows they select are not one of these 4 and 5 stars that they might need to make up their numbers on the 31st of October. The other point is that, you know, many farmers sell cows and calves at foot, and I suppose it may help to sell a cow if they're selling the cow with the calf and with a good calf. And from that point of view, if the cow and calf pair are sold off and they're sold early before weaning, well then the cow and calf aren't there for the data collection part of the BDGP scheme. So the farmer is unable to say how quiet the calf was at weaning, or answer any of the survey questions in relation to the cow and the calf at weaning. And if that animal is gone, there will be a penalty or a pro rata reduction there for that part of the BDGP program that relates to the surveys and side of it, you know. So I suppose on the BEEP side then as well, where farmers are participating in the BEEP scheme, the new BEEP-S, then they are getting paid for weighing the cow and calf, the pair, the dam and the calf. And some of the farmers have also selected a meal feeding option in that scheme. So with the meal feeding option, whatever cows and calves you have weighed, those are the cows and calves that are committed to this scheme. So if the farmer weighs 20 cows and calves, the 20 cows and calves are committed to the scheme, and if he has also signed up to do the meal feeding option, then it is expected that he will have those calves on the farm to meal feed them. And that meal feeding option takes place at weaning time. So those calves must be offered concentrates for 4 weeks before weaning and 2 weeks after weaning. So that's 6 weeks entirely of concentrate feeding there for those calves. So if the calf or the cow is sold, or the pair of them indeed is sold before weaning time, they haven't committed to that program, and there's penalties there as well. So of course, when the 6 weeks is up and the calf is fully weaned, then the cow can be sold, of course, after weaning, and there won't be any implications there. It's just if they're sold early. So, you know, you have two schemes there. You have the BEEP-S and the BDGP. They're both two separate schemes, but there's a bit of crossover in them. So I think farmers should be aware of that and don't rush into making decisions. You know, make a good informed decision and talk to their advisor as well before they select, you know, to discuss what animals they're selecting to make sure they would avoid penalties.
So it's important to consider which cows are being sold in advance if they're involved in the Beef Data Genomics Programme or the Beef Environmental Efficiency Programme, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
If you take the average suckler herd of 20 cows and there was 2 or 3 cows empty, what options are available for farmers for these 2 or 3 empty cows?
Okay, well, I suppose, yeah, again, the farmer will be bearing in mind that the two schemes we just discussed to make sure that they aren't impacted. There may be an option to sell those cows, you know, while prices are good, and then in that line they are also meeting with getting started on the 5% reduction under the BEAM scheme, which we mentioned earlier. The farmer may have good replacement heifers coming up, or there may be older cows. Those two may be older cows, we'll say, those empty cows, and they can be substituted with a good replacement heifer instead. Or if the farmer has good facilities on the farm, he may decide to hold on to them and feed them on for a while, if that's an option, to feed them for some weeks before selling, and so he has the option of going to the mart, or he has the option of maybe feeding them and going to the factory with them. It'll depend on the cost of doing that, and I think every farmer needs to sit down and look at what the prices are under the two sales mentioned there, and whether it's mart or factory. Check what their meal price is. How long they need to feed them for, the cost of the feeding over the number of weeks, and to see if it's worth their while, selling as soon as possible, or feeding on a bit. Also, I suppose another, health on the farm is another consideration there, because if there's cases of TB, or if there's an outbreak in an area, farmers are conscious of this, and holding on to large numbers coming into the winter. That from that point of view, it might be a good idea as well to, if there are animals that can be sold, prior to a farmer being locked up themselves, that they can do that as well while they're permitted to do so.
So complete a budget for each of the options, and discuss it with their advisor.
Yeah.
Sinead, health and safety is something that we're talking an awful lot about, and particularly when it comes to calving time. What steps can farmers take now to reduce risks at calving time?
Well, I suppose with the scanning, the farmer will be able to see what animals they are surplus and can be sold. Other than that, they would know the known cross or difficult cows on the farm, cows that might be a risk at calving time. It may be an option now, if those cows are still there and have been troublesome up to now, that the farmer would consider, and seriously consider, when the calf is weaned, that those cows be sold off, because it is not worth, they're not so valuable that it's worth holding on to them and risking injury or fatality on the farm over it. So they can be fattened, as you discussed, after weaning, and sent to the factory. I wouldn't advise that they be sold on to another farmer. If there's a cow on the farm that is a problem cow, it is highly risky sending that cow, passing that on to another farmer. You're only passing on the problem. So that's what I would be recommending, that animal will be sent to the factory. And I suppose also, when you're thinking ahead then to calving time and looking at the facilities on the farm around calving, it's a good opportunity now to assess those facilities and see, can they be improved in advance of calving, so that it would make it a safer place for the farmer at around calving time. So things like improvement to the facilities, maybe installing a calving gate if there isn't one there, or carrying out repair work, putting in head scoops. There is grant aid there under the TAMS. It's still there. It's 40% grant aid for farmers, the majority of farmers, and 60% grant aid for young farmers. So it shouldn't be overlooked, and farmers should seriously consider applying for TAMS for that. And as well as maybe looking at assessing the lighting around the yard and lighting in sheds. You can never have enough good lighting, especially in the winter time and those long evenings. So that's something that should be looked at as well. And all of this can be applied for and availed of and put in place well in advance of calving. And just to bear in mind that the minimum spend is €2,000 there if a farmer does want to go down the road of TAMS grant aid to improve facilities for calving.
Most definitely, Sinead. Finally, from the scanning results to date, what are the indications on farms across the country?
Well, I have figures there from the Newford herd, and I suppose they have scanned, and they have scanned 73 cows to date, and 72 out of the 73 cows there are in calf. Now, those cows were 40 days or more since their insemination date when they were scanned, and the remainder of the cows at Newford will be scanned when they are up around the same, I suppose, as David said, over the 32 days and up to the 40 plus days. So they remain to be scanned also. Then at Grange in the Derry Patrick herd, there were 95 cows scanned, and 92 out of the 95 were in calf there. So they're in a good position to look at grouping of animals, and for the winter, and what their plans are for dealing with those that weren't in calf.
Some great advice and tips there from David and Sinead. Thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Okay.
Thanks, Catherine.
That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to David and Sinead for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.